Hello and welcome to Life on Point. My name is Darren and with me is Jared and David, and we are pastors here at Connection Point Church in Southeast Missouri. Hey, do us a solid favor, wherever you watch this, wherever you listen to this podcast, man, just go and like it, comment on it, share it. The more you interact it, even if you hate us, interact with us. We would love for you to argue with us. Say, hey, that Jared dude is stupid, but he's got cool hair. You can say whatever you want. And because the more you interact with us, the more the algorithm is appeased. And if the algorithm is appeased, we are more apt to reach the nations of the world. And speaking of nations of the world, aha!
Nice.
Look at that.
Did,
That's why y'all pay me to host.
Yeah.
So,
we need a new theme. Appease the algorithm. By the way, I like that. That's our catchphrase. Yeah.
So today, fellas, we will be talking about the nations as they're represented in the Bible. I think, as we know, when most people think of the nations, they probably think of geopolitical in terms, right? We think of borders and countries and languages and all the things that they are. Even if you're in the church, you may, when somebody says the nations, you may be one of those gets all stirred up. Say, yes, we're going to go win the world. To the nations we go, right? Yeah. But in the Bible, it's laid out quite a bit differently than that. So whenever you look at the Bible, when it really starts digging into nations, it really starts in Genesis 10. And unfortunately for most people, we live here in Missouri, and this is flyover territory, right? People fly past us on their way to either one of the coast or one of the bigger cities. That's kind of flyover territory for a lot of people in the Bible, because it's just where the countries come from, right? This is where all the people of the Bible, all the ites and Itites and all the termites and everybody else come from. And so when we skip over it, I think we miss some stuff. There's some very fundamental things, because if you don't understand how the nations work in the Bible from a biblical worldview, not just a biblical worldview, but the people that existed in the ancient Near East, so ancient Israelites, ancient Hebrews, ancient people of that territory, how they looked at the nations. They looked at it as a completely different thing. They looked at it as more, it functions more as a theological cartography, if that makes sense. It's like this map of how people were interacted based off how God placed them, that it wasn't random. It wasn't just a series of wars and conflicts that developed these things. They believe that God orchestrated all of that. And when they look at it, and they look at Genesis 10, and it kind of maps it out. It says this is how God intended it for it to look. And then Genesis 11 comes around and blows it all up, right? And then we see in Deuteronomy 32 where we kind of learn why it happened. We get a little bit of insight on the what happened in Genesis 11, though, because we didn't really get a full picture in Genesis 11. And then we learn later on in Acts 17 what God's plan is for the nations right now. And so if you had to start in Genesis 10, David, when you read those, that genealogical list, what comes to mind for you? What key observations do you have?
Yeah, well, right off the bat, of course, it opens even with, this is right after the flood. We've got basically a world of 8 people at that point, right? We've got a world of 8 people, and yet we see population just explode.
Correct.
And it's interesting, of course, the way that the scriptures in 10 are laid out is they take the 3 sons and identify specific descendants from those sons. Of interest, there's 70 in all.
Right.
And which has its own significance in that. You
might want to clarify a little bit here. That's the Masoretic text shows it with 70. I think the Septuagint had it with 72, which proves another reason why Septuagint's not always the best. But hey, we digress. But yeah, by and large, the more ancient texts say it was 70, which is cool because 70 means the number of perfection. Right, exactly.
Completion, right. And the 7. And then, but what we have is of interest, Ham has the largest with 30, 26 from Shem, and then about 14 from Japheth. Yep. And 2 different pronunciations, Japheth,
I was going to say.
Whichever way you want to say
it. I'm a Japheth guy.
Yeah. Anyway.
We'll say Gesundheit.
But it's interesting because they also begin to settle and we'll talk about that, where God is the one that actually apportions the lands, but you see them migrate certain ways. Mm-hmm. You see Japheth migrating towards the north and towards the coastal lands, basically what we call Europe and in Western Russia, that region. And then you have the descendants of Ham settling down towards Palestine and then down towards the southern regions, North Africa. And then you have Shem, where you drop the H, that's where we get Semitic. So you get more of the Semitic regions in the Middle East and out towards Asia.
Right.
And so they almost take the world and kind of, God divides them in three quadrants of the known world at that time.
Correct.
And so, I mean, that's really where it just all starts. And it gives details on some of those. It goes into more details on a few of them, like, what am I thinking of here? I mean, you see a number of them mentioned later on, like Gog, Magog. You have Cain, the Canaanites, which are, of course, very important as we get into the time of the patriarchs and Abraham, and then the settlement through the time of Joshua into the land. And so we just see, again, and you know, the way it ends, these are the clans of Noah's sons, according to their family records, in the nations of earth spread out from these after the flood. And
that's exactly right. That's the hinge verse, to be honest, Jerry, because that's, when you look at that verse, verse 32, it tells us one thing. It says the nations spread across the earth after the flood, right? But Genesis 11, when we roll over into it says something completely different. So it acts like 10 provides the outcome while Genesis explains how the dispersion occurred, if that makes sense. So it's kind of like it's reversed in some levels, right, as you read it. So when you look at 1032, then how that crosses over into 11, what comes to mind there?
Well, I think one of the things that I like what you said is early on is that I think it's the way that we learn today, that we open up our history books and these are things that we know. And even the way we're taught, we memorize them,
right,
and we regurgitate them and we get the A on the test. And what you were saying a little bit ago is that you almost, because of the way that we learn today, it's easy to forget that, as you say, as you read over some of this, it's easy to gloss over, but you realize after the fact that you're learning you're learning a story. There are reasons for why God is sharing this information with us. And I don't want to jump ahead, but I do think that what is important when we get into chapter 11 and we see the tower and we see this attempt to reach God, you start to realize that it's setting up why there's so much division today. I think that some people, I think this is really good for some people who ask the question, how come if God is the God of the entire world, how come he specifically comes through a small country like Israel? And I think that as you read this, you start to realize that the Israelites, which, not to jump ahead, but it's more of a rescue mission as it is an exclusive club. And so I think that the chapter 11, and I'm sure you're going to go in here in just a second, just kind of sets up how this breaking off happens, why different groups of nations are now under a certain rule, and why it might be difficult to reach them in their culture, in their era, because of what they battle against. And I think it's just a beautiful setup to let me explain to you why you live in the world that you live. That's what jumps out to me. In regards to the specific details of 11, I'm very interested to see what you'd like to share with us about those details.
Well, we know Genesis 11 describes the building of a city and a tower. And I think a lot of people get hung up in the architectural part of this when it's really more about a theological rebellion, right? It is, hey, we are going to build something for ourselves because we're going to show God that, number one, that we can do the thing, and we can in effect, we can do the thing that God asks us to do without really obeying him, right? So we're going to build this tower. What is it? They call them an axis mundi, is where it's like the central point of activity where where heaven and earth interact with one another. So that's in essence what they were trying to build. If you, and I'm sure most people know, maybe the Tower of Babel was a ziggurat, which is a steep tower, or and some people will call a temple. By the way, we talk a little bit about things like this in our last podcast, and one of our podcasts called Sacred Spaces. We'll link that in here, and Zach will. He loves it when I do that. And we'll drop a link in there so you can look up some of our conversation about sacred spaces. And this is one of those sacred spaces called a ziggurat. Some people call it the Tower of Babel. And it was not really a public gathering like we think of as a temple, but a symbolic structure representing the meeting point between heaven and earth. And from there, Babel reflects an attempt to manufacture sacred space, right? And through human initiative, let us make a name for ourselves. You know, what is that? It's talking about autonomy right there, centralized control rather than filling the earth as commanded. Yeah, because this was in direct rebellion from the covenant that God had with mankind, which was to spread throughout the earth and populate it.
Just to interject, and then please continue. I think what's really wonderful about the whole story of 11 is that it's, as you said, they're trying to manufacture their own destiny. And what God is really saying, when you read this, it's easy to ask the question: is God concerned that they're gonna overthrow him and make it? I mean, so but like you said, it's a theological statement that God is saying, I get to decide how I want this to go. You're the children. You do as I tell you. Yep. And so hidden in the story, I think, really tells the story of humanity as a whole trying to reach God, and God saying, I've got this under control. So I just love that part that you shared there. So not to throw you off, you got a thing?
Yeah. Well, one thing I love about that, and I always love the humor, I guess you could say, that God reveals in the text, right?
Yeah. NASA would have blown their minds.
Yeah. I mean, if we understand the region, the Mesopotamia region, I mean, that's basically, we mentioned the sons and the table of nations in 10. For the most part, they remain contained.
Correct.
In that region.
That small region, yep.
And I love the fact that the scriptures tell us in 4, this was their mind. Their mind in 11:4. They said, "Come," you already mentioned this. Right. "Let us build a city with a tower on top of the sky." Not the structure, but again, the theological issue, right? "Let us make a name, for otherwise we will be scattered throughout the earth."
Correct.
Fast forward a little bit. God says, if they've begun to do this, they'll think nothing is impossible for them. We get to 9, and he almost takes their words and turns it on them. I mean, to me, I love Scripture when it does that, right? "Therefore it is called Babylon, and this is in verse 9, for there the Lord confused the language of the whole earth, and the thing that they were worried about in verse 4, otherwise will be scattered throughout the earth." What does God turn around and do? "And from there the Lord scattered them throughout the earth." So he kind of took them.
So far as why I love you, David, because literally every verse I was going to read, if you didn't, you've read them. So congratulations. You're reading my mind.
You see this is what's crazy, is you read verse 4, it says, "Otherwise, if we don't do this, we will be scattered."
That's what I mean.
It's the thing that happens. And when you look at what was told to Noah, what did he ask him to do? To be fruitful and multiply. But they saw it as a loss of power. They saw it as division. And it's just ironic that the thing that they feared, that's.
I mean, to me, it's a throwback to the garden. I mean, again, it's like, in that case, God placed a tree in the middle of the garden. In this case, man placed the ziggurat or the tower in the middle of their land, and they're literally, the enemy is literally asking them. It's like, who said you couldn't do this thing? Who said it? Like, did God say you couldn't build a tower? Did God say you really didn't need to disperse? Did he say that? Or is that just something you're doing? And so they go, you're right. I don't know if he did say that. Let us not be dispersed. Let's not do whatever we think he might have said. So to me, it's almost this whole reinvention of the fall over and over again, because I think it just shows our humanity.
And you see the repeating themes throughout the entirety of Scripture. So it's not surprising that you would see that motif come back.
So at this point, God's response is judicial dispersal. Linguistic division results in what? Geopolitical fragmentation. We get Babel becomes this turning point, and where unified humanity, and that's the key, where unified humanity fractures into what? Distinct nations. Which, if you're already move on into Deuteronomy, which I think kind of starts talking about the allocation. So why it took place, what was going on kind of behind the scenes a little bit, because we see what's going on. We see the Tower of Babel. We see God's response. We know the outcome. But what was really going on when the Most High looked down at the nations, David?
Right. Yeah. I mean, like Darren just said, Deuteronomy 32, within the Song of Moses. So Moses is recapping basically the histories of the people, and he's getting ready. I mean, this is towards the end of his life, and so we have this, and contained within that song in verses 8 and 9, we have, when the Most High gave the nations their inheritance and divided the human race, of course, reflecting back on Genesis 10, he set the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the people of Israel, but the Lord's portion in his people, Jacob, his own inheritance. So we see there that we have these 70 divisions or 72, whatever number you want to call, one portion from one of those lines, Shem, we see Jacob arise up.
Right.
Through that, we then have this portion identified where God is going to claim his inheritance, and that happens to be the nation of Israel.
Right.
But the one thing we don't want to lose sight on is he wasn't just selecting that nation just to select just that. Ultimately, we find, and we'll get here, is that it's through that nation that he's going to bring them all back together.
Right.
He's going to reunify in his son. There's going to be a reunification ultimately. But for now, he's selecting this one apportionment of peoples for himself. And that's what we see here in Deuteronomy 32.
We look at Deuteronomy 32, Jared. What do you see in there? There's a lot. I know there is some, I guess you might call scholastic gentlemen's disagreements about whether it is sons of God versus sons of Israel, which contextually changes things a little bit. Because then the language there, if it's sons of God, that's when you start getting into that idea of divine counsel workflows and the worldview that people like to talk about. We hear it quite a bit. But if you look at Deuteronomy, what do you see taking place there as far as how God handled things?
I think that it's hard for me not to view this passage the way that I view. I think we all are going to, because of our experience and our skill sets and our leanings. We're going to view Scripture and the work of the church and missiology, I think, in different ways. And for me, I can't help but to see it from the lens of the skeptic, from the lens of the unbeliever. And I keep going back to the question over and over again, which is, if God is the God of the nations, if he's the God of everyone, then why uniquely Israel? Why this small country? And so I think when you look through Deuteronomy, one thing that jumps off the page to me is that God was before all of this. He knew. In fact, he not saying that it's necessarily his perfect will for humanity, but it is his oh goodness gracious. It's his permissive will is the word I'm looking for. It's his permissive will that we would segregate, that we would break up. And in a sense, he kind of had a hand in it, but it doesn't take him off guard. And so you can kind of understand that as he gives the nations over and he allows them to do what they want to do, and he what's the word? He reserves a part for himself. And you start to realize and you start to see the workings of Israel as not just the gem, not just the apple of his eye, but as a tool that he will use to bring. I mean, what did he tell Abraham? That it is through you the people of all the nations will be blessed. Right. And I think it's that last phrase that it's easy to overlook. I don't know what a Jew would have thought about this around this time, or even now. Do they view Israel as the tool in which is going to bring the world together? I think so, but I think that it's beautiful to see this come through in the story of Jesus, not to jump to like Acts 2 or anything, or Acts 17 just yet, but that I see the workings and the setting up. And again, it's so easy, as you said, to just breeze right over, but it gives you a sense of, okay, God knows what's going on. He knows what he is doing. I can make some sense of these other nations and their practices. That's kind of what jumps out to me as I look through some of this.
And we talk about Israel, I think a lot of people want to jump to the conclusion that Israel is somehow elevated in a sense that above other nations, like it was very selective in the sense that it was exclusive in nature, not so much. But to me, and when I read the text, I see it more as Israel was chosen for the sake of the nations, right? So that is the literal container through which the Messiah or the Savior of the world would be brought forth. So everything that would be saved will be saved through the Messiah, and that container that produced the Messiah was Israel. And just like the Messiah was going to be broken, abused, not seen for who he was, as a small thing, not kingly in his earthly sense, Israel is going to be kind of seen the same way. It's going to be a small country. It's going to be a country that is largely passed over. We know if you look at ancient wars and ancient conflicts, Israel was necessary simply because it was the point of movement between Europe and Asia and Africa. And so when Egyptian or any other African nations would be at war with any European or Asian nation, they had to go through that little segment of the world we call now Israel, and that put them in a very strange place. And we're going off topic a little bit, but when you get back to, but it all to me is the reason why Israel was chosen. It is like this point of transportation. It's a transport nation. It is a nation of communal capability.
We could definitely, I think, break down the why, and I think maybe it's geographic. Maybe it's, I think, the way that he separates his people, and the way that he sets up Judaism, and the way that he sets up the scriptures, and I think one of the most powerful aspects of Jesus is how we can look back into the scriptures and see how he was the fulfillment of prophecy, which I think then gives us more and more of a reason to believe that he is who he says he is. But you need the context to be able to see that, and you can't have the context without the nation. Right. And so he had to pick somebody. Right. Yep. And so it's interesting to think that it might be geographic. It could be for all kinds of reasons. But I think that could be definitely one of them. And not to mention the when. I think the when Jesus came was important. But let's not, because that's definitely off topic. So David, go ahead. You want to say something?
Yeah. No, I forgot.
We did it.
Yeah,
we did it.
Well, I know what I was going to say. It was just like you said, and even throughout the Old Testament, as we see the turmoil that surrounds this one region, right? I mean, you got the Assyrians coming in from the north. You got the Persians coming in from the east. You've got the Egyptians coming. I mean, they're all constantly pivoting around this one specific Mesopotamian valley, the Fertile Crescent. Very, very rich in sources, which basically follows the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. And you just see the constant back and forth over just this one region. And you're like, why? Well, why?
Exactly.
Right? Well, it's God's inheritance, according to the Deuteronomy, right? This is the region that he chose, the people group that he chose. Mm-hmm. Again, it's his choice. His choice, right? And so, that was just what I was going to say.
For the same reason he chose that area to be the beginning place of humankind. That's where the garden in that proximity. And so he chose that. It could have been in North America, but it wasn't, right? Yeah. It could have been in the Antarctic or the North Pole. It could have been in many places, but he chose that very specific place.
And if it was in North America, instead we'd be asking, why wasn't it in the Middle East? He could have picked the Middle East. Exactly. He has to pick somewhere. It has to be one location, one origin point.
Right.
And so any if you don't understand the context of the area and the stories behind it, any area is going to seem just as arbitrary as any other, right? So,
And then we get to Genesis 12, which is what I like to call the corrective move, where Abraham is his covenant is becomes known, and we learn about who Abraham is. I'll read Genesis 12. 1 through 3, so maybe David can quit reading my mail, knowing what I want to read. Okay. He's done it every time. So Genesis 12, 1 through 3, I use the ESV, so it may be a little different from some. Now the Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you, and I'll make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Immediately after Babel's dispersal, God calls Abram.
Waste no time.
That is not coincidence.
Nope.
Right.
So, David?
Yeah. Again, this is, pointing to once again, God's sovereign choice of one of the descendants of Noah, and then down through one of the descendants and through another descendant, ultimately ending up with Abram or Abraham. And interestingly, though, as he says here, as the Lord says to Abraham, this isn't just to bless my chosen inheritance.
Right, it's the entire earth.
It's the entire earth. It's all the populace is going to be blessed. We ultimately know, and we've already said, that's through the lens of Christ, right? That's through his chosen his chosen nation is going to bring about his deliverance. It's going to bring about God's plan for the nations.
Correct.
And that's really what we see in here, and we were reflecting on from Deuteronomy. When Moses was reflecting back on God's choice for these people.
Correct. Got anything, Jared?
I was just about to say that was it. It's that ending piece of number 3, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. I think is just so paramount, and I think it just foreshadows the role of Israel and as the origin point, as a separate people, a holy nation that God is using and working through. To achieve ultimately his ends. And now you've got 2,000 years after Jesus, a bunch of Gentiles across the ocean are now talking about him as their savior. I mean, I think it just shows that God knew what he was doing.
Right. Election here is not exclusionary. It is strategic. I think we miss the strategic aspect of it. We look at things as being, hey, unfair, right? Why them? Who are they? What did they do? Blah, 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 so forth and so on. And, even with in the language, some of the language used when it says, in him who dishonors you, I will curse. I mean, I get it.
He's got a plan. And at the end of the Gospels, you see, you talk about exclusion. It's a story of broadening. The broadening, right. Even in Romans 9, when Paul talks about how God can save the Gentiles also. I mean, he's broadening the perspective of the inclusion into the family, and so it shrinks down for a moment, right, and then it blows back up.
Yeah, we see pretty much from that point forward the constant falling away of the people of Israel. They seem to constantly, they may be chosen, but at the same time they are very fragile and very volatile. They also they get in God's way quite often, and I'm assuming he just shakes his head and goes, "Yeah, it'll work out anyways, no matter how bad you try to make this. Even if I have to wipe you off the face of the earth, seemingly, I will make this happen one way or the other."
He said that to Moses, didn't he?
Exactly. Yeah, he warned them. This was going to happen. If I had to scatter you from one end of the earth to the other, I will be seen as the curator of all of this, no matter what you do, no matter how many towers you build, no matter how many temples you construct, no matter how many different religions or avenues you think you need to reach me. I will show you all that I am the curator of all of these things despite you. And not just despite us, because he loves us and he wants redemption for us, because he wants his family. Because I think that's one part that's missed in all this. Israel is chosen so that all the families of the earth might be blessed, not just nations, but families, the people of God. Because God, it seems to be, if you look at the Bible, it's almost family driven, and it's and that's the thing that I won't get off on this tangent, but this is the thing that seems to be under the microscope more than anything else in the modern era is the family. The whole construct of the family is under destruction and being redefined and repurposed and seen in different ways, which we're kind of getting to that. To me, we're getting to that cumulative point where God's you're pushing me.
That's not surprising. That's not surprising, because as you were talking about the nations, the fact that there are nations is it's a contingency plan, isn't it?
Right.
It's something that didn't necessarily have to be the case, and so it's not surprising that the family and the individual and the collection is what's important. It's not just a nation, like you said. Yeah.
So we've looked at the Old Testament. There's a ton more in the Old Testament. We didn't get into Daniel. Could have gotten to Daniel. And to save time, we won't go into Daniel, even though it's awesome to get into Daniel about the whole.
Yeah, we've been going
about the unseen realm and different things like that. But We won't do it. We'll save it for another day. I think it's actually on our list to do one day.
Part 2, oh no.
But we're going to get into the New Testament, right? We've looked at the Old Testament, and so for all those out there who say, well, look, that's just the law, and that's just the Old Testament.
That's the context.
It's just blah, blah, blah. You don't, I mean, what did Jesus really say about all this? What did Paul write, or Peter, or James, or John? Did they really even mention any of this at all? I mean, did they mention anything? Well, there's a little thing called Acts 17. And we get Paul at Mars Hill. You want to read that, Jared? You got it? If you don't, I can read it real quick.
I do have it. Which particular part do you want?
Acts 17, 26 through 27. Yes,
of course. I was just making sure you knew. Yeah.
Yeah.
You care about my version?
I do
From
not.
one man he made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out to him and find him, though he is not far from any one of us. That's probably pausing. That might be my favorite verse, one of my favorite verses in Scripture. For in him we live and move and have our being. As some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. Acts 17 is my jam.
Yep. And that literally echoes Genesis 10 and Deuteronomy 32 all over again. It brings it all full circle.
Yeah.
But this time, instead of a nation of Israel, it is a people of God. It is his chosen people, the church. The ecclesia is now going to be the one that spreads throughout the earth. David, got anything, or Jared? Either one?
Well, I think when you look through Acts, I mean, think of Pentecost, think of Acts 2. It's almost like the restoration. You know, God uses at Babel the language barrier to disrupt. But then I'm sorry if you're going to bring that up. But then he almost, well, he doesn't almost. He ironically and actually uses tongues to bring people back together. It's like he's undoing.
Right.
And so this is the whole.
That was my mic drop. You got it. No, you did great.
No,
you nailed it.
Scratch that.
No. But you're right. Because it's like Colossians 2:15 says, he disarmed the rulers and authorities and put them to open shame by by beating them, by winning over them in him. Ephesians 3:10 says, so that through the church, the manifold wisdom of God might now be made known to the rulers and authorities in heavenly places. And so that's where that Daniel stuff comes in handy.
Yeah, but you really want to go there, don't you?
But not really. Not right now. I don't think we have time.
There,
But like you said, I mean, it's exactly what you said. The implications are there, and it's stark if people would just open their eyes to what Pentecost is.
It was
the reversal of the Babel.
That's the answer. That's the answer to what you said earlier about the Old Testament is the context.
Right.
It's the question to the answer.
Why did we need the fire? Why did we need the tongues?
And
Why did that thing happen?
And it brings the New Testament to life, because you realize the New Testament doesn't happen in isolation. And when you see it, yes, it's all about Jesus, but look at the context, and it just it brings it to life, and it makes it robust, and it makes it beautiful, and it makes it powerful. So that's why I think you go back and you study and you read through the stories that in isolation you go, okay, here we go. We got this guy who made this guy who made this nation.
Right.
Okay, next,
the begats.
The begats.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to me whenever you look at that whole story and how it is literally like a flip of what happened at Babel, because it was never going to happen again that mankind could unify in one voice, in one mission, in one idea. The only way that was ever going to happen is if God himself allowed it to happen. And that is exactly what happened at Pentecost. He allowed us to be able to go into the world unified by the singular thing that is his spirit. And his spirit is what can drive us into the world now, hopefully led the opposite of Babel. It's interesting, the church also had their own little tower up. This is off the cuff a little bit. They had their own Tower of Babel moment there early on in their formation. They were going to the temple, as was their custom. We see that quite a bit, right? They never quit really doing the temple work. Not there was anything wrong with them following the customs of their people, but that was, they were still going to the temple 3 or 4 years after they were given the commission and the power to go, right? And they hadn't quite fulfilled what God had asked them to. Almost like the church itself was kind of going, maybe we just like hanging out here, going to the temple, me, John, and Peter. We can heal people on our way there and do the things we do. But then God dropped his own version of a dispersion amongst us. And that was a man named Saul. And he scattered us throughout the entire world to become the thing that he asked us to be, which was the tabernacle, the voice of God into the wilderness, into the wild, into the nations of the earth. So it's like we do have this bad habit of wanting to build temples, build our own towers of Babels, so we ourselves can be the holy place instead of him.
Yeah. One thing, and this is some of what's already been said, but one thing is, I love where this is positioned in Acts.
Yes.
Okay? I mean, we kind of scanned through it and made mention of Paul's in Athens at this time. The hub, the center of mythology of all the things, right? You got Olympus, Mount Olympus, and all the things that they would focus on, another structure, another building, right, that they're trying to identify. How do we reach the gods? In fact, Paul's talking in here, you guys have all these gods, you have all these things going on, you have all these different, almost like you have all these different views, languages, perspectives, all this, everything going on, but you got this one unknown God. Right? Let me tell you all about him.
Yeah.
And I love this because basically what you read, Jared, in 26 and 27 and into 28, right? Through one man, he made every nationality to live over the whole earth.
Correct.
But he did so. He did this so that they might seek God. Ultimately, this unknown God that all these people are talking about in Paul's time. The idea is to bring them all back to the central focus of who God is, the one that created them, right? Let me see where. And he did so that they might seek God, and perhaps they might reach out and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. I mean, that's a beautiful thing, right? He's right there.
Yeah.
Right. It's and then for in him we live and move. We have our being. Some of you are poets have said, for we are his offspring. And then I just wanted to go into the next one. Since then, verse 29, we are God's offspring, not just the nation of Israel. Not just right. Paul's talking to these Gentiles in Athens. We are all his offspring. We shouldn't think of the divine nature like it is some, and I'm just going to put the word tower in there, right? Something that is gold or silver or stone. That's generally what they built these structures out of, right? An image fashioned by human art and imagination. That's not what God's all about.
Right.
And when you put it in the middle of Athens and this whole discussion going on, I just love that picture that he's just bringing them back to reality.
Absolutely.
To reality God.
I wanted to bring up 30, which is the very next verse. So what a lovely segue. But it says, in the past, God overlooked such ignorance, but he now commands all people everywhere to believe in his son and to repent. So I think this kind of can give some kind of nod to those that ask, well, what does God do with those that don't necessarily... They have almost an excuse. Well, they don't have an excuse. We'll talk. That's a whole nother conversation. But they don't have the information that we have, and so we talk about like the age of ignorance, and maybe this is another podcast. But it suggests that God has overlooked that ignorance. He is judging people based upon the light that they have. And so that might be a fun topic to talk about. Do we think the age of ignorance is done with?
We hope God's still winking.
I think that it might be happening at different times and different as the gospel is spread, as we're commanded. But he kind of hints at. Again, this doesn't take God by surprise. He's not just unfairly throwing the rest of the entire world out. He's got a plan. He's patient with us, but he does call us now to believe in. And it goes on in 31 that he has given proof of this to everyone by raising him from the dead.
So we've learned that the nations are theological categories, not just political ones, right?
Yeah.
And the church, based off of the reversal of Babel, is now a multi-ethnic sign of humanity restored, right? Because that's what the Bible often talks about. Well, they will know that you are mine because you love me, and it's real. And you don't love by excluding people that are of different tribes and different ethnicities. If you're not inclusive, I get everybody lives in different parts of the world, so you all have different things, but I mean, you should be a all-inclusive. We see that based off Revelation 7:9. And that is where John says this. After this, I looked and behold a great multitude that no one could number, from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes, with palm branches in their hands. The biblical art does not erase the nations. It redeems them under the lordship of Christ. And the nations were the arena of redemption, not simply a division geopolitical centers.
I like that. It's I heard recently that it's kind of like how God now makes this declaration, but there are people on the outside that have not yet heard the proclamation, right? The decision has been made, but the word's still getting out. And I think that's something that Paul is hinting at. But I really like this Revelation 7:9. I think is a beautiful. It brings it forth, but it is, of course, all under Christ. Apart from Christ, I mean, but it is because of what he did that any of us can be saved, and it is his mission again that Israel was a search and rescue mission rather than it was an exclusive club. And I think we now have begun to see the end result, and in Revelation you see that he has now restored, like you said, every tribe, every nation, every people, every language. Yeah, I like that. That's good.
It's not exclusive. I mean, every nation tends to want to make it exclusive, to be honest. The Romans, as they became more of a Christian nation, they made it more and more exclusive.
Yeah.
Americans tend to only think of our faith in an American type of way. But we just like exclude mentally all the other tribes and nations and cultures out there.
I think the issue is that we use different words in different ways. I mean, I think we can say that the truth of Christianity is unique, objective, and particular.
Correct.
But that doesn't mean that it's exclusive in the types and the tribes and the nations of people that can benefit from the grace of Jesus. And so depending on how one might use the word exclusive, we are saying that Jesus is the way. And so in that sense, it is uniquely true. Right. But it is because it is in its unique truth that all men, all women, God is separate from any one of us. This almost helps us to champion the idea that it is for all the nations, whereas there might be other religions out there that are incredibly exclusive in that way, the way that you're using.
Yeah, as we're talking about this, one thing I was thinking of is, we are mentioned that nature itself, right? That nature itself reveals who God is.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
However, it's interesting when you think about it, his special revelation found in the text that we're reading isn't segmented to just the English language or the German language.
Correct.
Or the French language. It, to my last knowledge, has been translated into over 3,000 different languages.
Correct. Showing
the fact that I know of no other book that would even come close to that having been translated into that many languages. I mean, I don't know of any.
Exactly right.
I mean, 5 languages you might translate a book into, but 3,000 different ones, which just shows once again that this message reaches beyond language barriers, reaches beyond anything that we can even think of.
It's ironic, isn't it, when we started with Babel?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But
that's true.
It unifies the message and spreads it into so many languages so that we're all on one common foundation of Jesus Christ. And
you mentioned earlier in Acts 17, as you continue past where I read, and you said a word that kind of, I think, is threads throughout all this, and that is the familiar. So the family aspect of it. So it's all about family. God was always trying to build his son. You said his sons, his children, and that's what he's looking for. He is building this family that honors him, that loves him for who he is, not for what he does, and that the fact that he and only he is the unifying voice. That he and only he is had the power to save us, right? And he chose the way he went. This very like. Nobody would pick Israel, right? Nobody would not pick Israel for anything. If you were in ancients, you would have picked Gog or Magog or Rome or Greece or somebody, Egypt, anybody. But no, he picked this little place, and it's from that little place that he saved all the families of the earth, as John said. And I think we can end this basically with, once we understand how the nations work within the scheme of God and how they are more of a theological category than they are political entities. The mission is, when we go on mission, when we are called into the nations of this world, mission is participation in that divine reclamation. And so we are being able to help God restore what was lost right there in the Tower of Babel. Sound good? We want to know that?
I like that.
We're going to cut that. We're going to call it good. We're going to call that a strong point to end on. Yep. Hey, we love you guys, and we really do. We hope you enjoyed the stuff we talk about. Help it stir something in you to study more in the Bible, dig into the Word of God. Hey, don't take our word for it. Hey, come back in here and debate with me. I'm totally cool with that. I would love to hear what you think. Hey, maybe you do agree with Jared, and he does have really cool hair. And so you can agree with him. Hey, put that down in the comments. But our hope for you is that you live a life complete and a life on point. And we will see you all next time.